Hello Angel Besties, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Rachel, and welcome, I can't believe I'm saying this, to my mid-year book Freakout tag. How are we already halfway through the year? That is terrifying. I feel like I don't have enough time to read everything that I want, but I will say I have had a really great reading year so far, and that is what I am here to talk about today. If you do not know what the mid-year book Freakout tag is, it is essentially me taking stock of my reading year so far. What have been my favorite books that I've read so far this year? What are my least favorites? What books am I looking forward to? What was my favorite sequel that I read? Do I have a new favorite author? Do I have a new fictional crush? And lots of other questions like that. And I absolutely love this video. This is one of my favorite videos to watch, and as a creator it's just very fun to look back at my year, see how things are going, and see what I need to get to for the rest of the year. So I have, let's see, I have about 15 questions that I'm going to answer and just kind of go through the books that I've read this year and see what sticks out to me positively and negatively. All right, so let's freak out together and let's start talking about the books that I've read this year. Question number one is, of course, the best book that you've read so far in 2023. By the way, I think you're supposed to only answer with one book. I'm not doing that. You can't make me. I simply cannot pick my favorite book of the year so far. I'm gonna do it at the end of the year. I like to rank my best books, but I cannot do that right now. So I'm definitely gonna have multiple books per question. So best books, let's talk about them. All right, so number one, the first book that sticks out to me for this question is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I couldn't have seen this coming, okay? I decided to do a cheeky little reading books out of my comfort zone reading vlog, and I picked up this book on the recommendation of some of my friends here on BookTube. They said it was fantastic, and I was like, you know what, why not? I am not drawn to the science fiction genre very much, if ever, and so I didn't ever imagine myself picking this book up, and what a terrifying thought, because this book is one of the best books that I have read this year, but also one of the best books that I've ever read in my entire life. This book affected me in such a way that when I finished it, I just burst into tears. And not even like at the ending, but it was really, the entire book had washed over me, and I was like, oh, I've just read one of the best books that I've ever read in my entire life. What a time to be alive. This book is a sci-fi novel. It follows an astronaut who is alone out in space trying to save the world, essentially, and he ends up coming across a very unlikely ally, and we kind of watch their adventure together. When I tell you, Rocky has my heart. Rocky owns me. He is everything to me. I cannot believe how affected I was by that character, and Ryland as well. Great, funny, wonderful narrator. I truly think that this book has zero flaws. I think that this is a perfect book, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't care what your reading preferences are. I don't care if you're a romance person, fantasy, historical fiction, whatever your thing is. I think that you'll like this book. I think anyone will like this book. I think it is so strong, and as I've also said many times, 100% recommend the audiobook. I actually think that the audiobook is kind of required to fully get the story, to get the full experience with it. This book will forever be imprinted on my heart, in my brain, on the back of my eyelids. I absolutely love this book, and I think about it quite often. Another book that has bewitched me body and soul and might be my best book of the year so far is The Ashes in the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. You guys have heard me talk about this book to death, but this is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night. This is the second official book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent. This is a vampire fantasy romance series. I absolutely loved this. This was my most anticipated read of the year, and it did not disappoint. It overwhelmed me with how much I loved it. Everything that I wanted from the sequel I got. I absolutely loved the character development, the action, the romance, the lore and history that was built in this book and that will come to play in future books. I just think Carissa is a genius. This series means the world to me. It's one of my favorite series of all time. Aurea and Rain are everything to me. I love them to death, and this book was fantastic. I was very scared because I loved the first book, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and I was like, how are we going to compete with that greatness? Well, Carissa wrote an even better book, in my opinion, in The Ashes in the Star-Cursed King, and this is one of my favorite fantasy romances ever. I think that this book is a perfect fantasy romance. I'm so happy that I read it. I'm so happy that I'm alive at the same time as Carissa Broadbent, and if I haven't convinced you to pick this book up yet, please do. So a couple of other books that really stood out to me that are definitely going to be on my best books of the year. I think, like, I cannot imagine not putting these books on that list. Number one is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book is super popular. It is a fantasy romance. It has dragons. It takes place at this war college. I absolutely loved this book. This book has a ton of hype and I think it is 100% deserved. This book was pure fun and pure joy. This is one of the most fun reading experiences that I have had all year. I definitely think that this book has flaws for sure, but for me, the pure joy and escapism that I felt while reading this is pretty unmatched in my reading year so far. This book has really lovable characters, a great romance, an interesting but easy enough to understand magic system and political system, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And the ending was insane. I think the best ending of a book that I've read this year is Fourth Wing. The last line of this book is crazy. I loved this so much. And this just like reminds me why I love fantasy and fantasy romance. It's so, so good. So absolutely love Fourth Wing. And then another dragon-based book is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. I actually just read this a couple weeks ago and I am utterly obsessed with this book. Once again, one of the most fun reading experiences that I have had all year. It is of course another fantasy romance. This book follows a princess named Elwyn. When she was born, she was bonded with 5 dragons, but she was locked away for most of her life because her father deemed her as a threat. She was able to escape, and now that she's grown, she wants to go back, break into the castle, and reunite with her dragons. There's a lot more that goes on in here, and honestly, my favorite part of this book was the found family aspect. We have a very, very fun band of thieves, ragtag crew. They're super fun, they're super amazing, and we have the most wonderful romance in this book between Elwyn and Commander Caden Velis. This book is very long, but it will fly. It is such a just fun, pure joy, happiness nonstop. Well, not like happiness all the time because some very sad things happen, but just you walk away from this book being so excited. This is an adventure book and I just had such a good time reading it. Another book that gets an A+ for escapism. I absolutely loved this, so definitely going to be a contender for my best book of the year as well. Okay, the next question is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far this year? Of course, I'm gonna have to say it. Obviously, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. This is 100% the best sequel that I've read this year. Nothing comes close. This was fantastic and it exceeded all of my expectations. But also, I want to give another honorable mention to another fantastic sequel that I read this year, and that is Clockwork Princess. This book is so shiny. This, if you know, you know. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even put into words the emotional roller coaster I went through reading not only this book, but the entire Infernal Devices trilogy. It's a really, really fantastic YA fantasy with some romance trilogy, and this book is just, no words. There are no words that can describe the way that this book left me feeling, but I love a book that brings out emotions. I love a book that just absolutely ruins my life, and this book definitely did that. So a very strong sequel for sure. All right, the next question is, what is a new release that you're dying to get to but haven't picked up yet? So some of these, I don't know how new they are, but I think they've all come out this year. They're books that I've recently purchased and I'm definitely wanting to get to soon. So the first is A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stasia Stark. This is a fantasy romance. It has hidden powers, it has an unlikely alliance, it has training sequences. I feel like this book is going to be really, really fantastic. I'm actually going to be reading this in July and I'm very excited. Another one is One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. This takes place in modern day New York City, but it follows a witch coven and kind of like warring witches and all of the family and political drama that goes on with that. I'm very excited for this as well. Another fantasy romance that I'm looking forward to is A Crown of Oaths and Curses by Jay Bree. This is the first book in a new fantasy romance series by this author. I did read the 2 prequel novellas that come before this book and I was intrigued. I'm excited. We have fae, we have witches, we have like every magical creature you can think of. I think that this book is going to be really fun. All right, the next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of 2023? First and foremost, I think we all know Iron Flame, which is the sequel to Fourth Wing. That book comes out November 7th or November 8th. I want to say whatever the Tuesday is. I cannot wait. I think about this book all the time. I am so excited. I am just so happy that we don't have to wait an entire year or 2 years at Sarah J. Maas for the sequel of this book. I'm so, so excited that it comes out this year and it's gonna be amazing. I'm gonna do like a full release day reading vlog for Iron Flame. I'm gonna bring you guys along with me, go to Barnes, pick up a copy, read the whole book, and vlog my thoughts because I just cannot wait for that book. I just absolutely love the feeling of being so, so excited for a book to come out, and Iron Flame is definitely taking up a lot of my thoughts. So absolutely the sequel to Fourth Wing is my most anticipated release for the rest of the year. But also another release that I'm very excited for that comes out, I believe October 19th, is the sequel to One Dark Window, which is Two Twisted Crowns. This This is an adult fantasy with a bit of a romance subplot. I was so, I don't want to say like surprised because I thought I would like it, but I didn't know how much I was going to absolutely love this book. It was really fantastic. The romance was great. The magic system was interesting. This is a very like dark kind of gothic autumnal vibes book, and that is perfect because the second book comes out in October. So I think it's going to be such an amazing time reading that book this fall, and I'm just super, super excited for that book to come out as well. All right, next question is biggest disappointment. Let's go. Okay, I will preface this with, I have had a very good reading year. I haven't been like gutted by a book yet, meaning like, you know, super disappointed by a book. I feel like I have tempered my anticipation for most books that I've picked up this year, but I do have a few duds that I thought were gonna be stunning, and they were less than stunning. So the first one that comes to mind is The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. This is kind of a spin-off of the Folk of the Air series, which is one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. It's so fantastic. Jude and Cardan are everything. This book follows Jude's younger brother, Oak, as he is now older, and his dynamic with a character named Surin. I just found this book to be very lackluster. I do think that it had still, you know, that really beautiful Holly Black writing style, but the plot was just a little all over the place, and things at the end were very convenient, just not very imaginative. And I also feel like we didn't really get to know Oak very well, and this is supposed to be his book. We got to know Surin pretty well, and I liked her, but I wasn't absolutely obsessed. And Oak just kind of fell flat for me. Also, their dynamic was just not very interesting and intriguing. And even though I knew that this wasn't going to be as good as the Folk of the Air series, I just think that Holly Black is so talented, and so I was expecting a little bit more from this book that I did not get. I think that I rated this book like 2.5 or 3 stars, and I really thought that this would be like a super strong 4-star at the lowest. So yeah, that was pretty disappointing. I will also throw into the ring Happy Place as a bit of a disappointment for this year. I say that because at the time that Happy Place came out, of Emily Henry's 3 releases, I had given 2 of them 5 stars. So Beach Read, loved that book, gave it 5 stars. People We Meet on Vacation, 5-star read. That is my favorite book by her. At one time, that was my favorite romance of all time. And then I read Book Lovers, wasn't super into that one, and I gave it 2 stars, but I went into Happy Place like, you know what? The odds are in my favor. I have loved 2 out of her 3 books. I think that there's a good chance that I'm gonna like Happy Place. And unfortunately, I just didn't. The main issue I had with that book is the relationship centers around miscommunication. I could not connect to that at all. I could not get behind the relationship at all. It just didn't make sense to me why these 2 people who had been together for so long, had been through so much, weren't able to communicate their feelings at this point in their relationship. There was a lot of things that went down both between them and individually, which I understand, but it still just doesn't really make sense. So I couldn't get behind the characters and their relationship. I also felt like the friend drama was also very random and kind of thrown in, and just didn't really hit me the way that I think that it was supposed to. And while I did like Harriet as a main character, I found some of the aspects of her personality to be relatable. Wynne was a pretty forgettable romance hero for me. So I think I gave that book 2 stars or 2.5 stars. That was pretty disappointing because I really wanted to have an amazing experience with another Emily Henry book. But unfortunately, I am now kind of split 50-50. I have loved 2 of her books and I have disliked 2 of her books. So Happy Place definitely was a disappointment for me. All right, the next question is new favorite authors. I have to say, I don't think that I have read tons of books by like one new author this year that I could give you a super clear answer, but I'm just gonna throw out a few names that do come to mind when I think of this, just because I've read maybe 1 or 2 of their books, but they were very, very strong 5 stars that I could see them becoming all-time favorites. So number 1 is going to be Brandon Sanderson. So this is Warbreaker. This is my favorite book by him. This is also probably a contender for one of my best books of the year. I love this book to death. I was just smiling the entire time that I read this. I had so much fun. This book was absolutely amazing. And I started the year reading this book pretty early on, and it just put me in such a good place for reading and fantasy, and I just absolutely loved this. So definitely Brandon Sanderson, I think, will work his way up to being one of my favorite authors. I also want to say Talia Hibbert, because I read Act Your Age, Eve Brown in February, and this book was such a delight. This was such a strong 5-star for me. I ended up annotating this book. Eve and Jacob's dynamic was absolutely fantastic. I love Eve Brown so much. I found her to be relatable and fun and interesting, and this book had so many sweet moments, funny moments, sad moments. Really, Talia Hibbert has a writing style that I very much connect to. I know that she's working on a new adult romance series right now, and I'm very excited about that. I think I'll definitely pick it up. So this book definitely sticks out to me. All right, the next one, I always love this question. Newest fictional crush. Okay, I don't feel like I'm fully obsessed with these 2 characters yet, but they're on their way. They're on their way to the book boyfriend roster, and that is Xaden and Caden, which wasn't planned, but I guess that works. These 2 books have two very sarcastic and fun dark-haired love interests, so of course I'm gonna love them. I definitely think I prefer Caden over Xaden at this point, but I'm excited. Both of these are the first books in what are going to be 5-book series, so I've got a lot more to learn about Xaden and Caden. I've got a lot more opportunities for them to impress me and to end up really making an impact on me and just absolutely loving them as new favorite characters. So I am looking forward to seeing more from them, but definitely Caden and Xaden. I can't believe that. That's like so cheesy. But they definitely left an impression on me. I'm excited to see what happens in the second book of both of these series. Those are probably my 2 fictional crushes right now. All right, the next question is newest favorite character. I have a few. Number 1 at the top of the list is Rocky. I would commit a federal offense for Rocky. I would do anything to protect him. He really just stuck to my heart in a way that not a lot of characters have. I really, really love him. I mean, this book was already fantastic, but as soon as he came onto the page, I was like, yep, I'm done. I'm sold. This is it. So definitely Rocky is a new all-time favorite character. I am also going to say Eowyn and Saskia and Ryder and Finian and Caden, the entire band of thieves. I cannot stress how fantastic the found family is in this book. It is so well written. It is so much fun. If that is something that you really look for in a fantasy book, this definitely delivers. It's so fantastic, and I just want to be a part of this friend group. Their dynamic was so sweet, but also very funny, sarcastic. They challenged each other. They supported each other. It was really, really well done. And I also really loved Violet Sorrengail. I feel like she was a very compelling character. I really, really just latched onto her in the beginning and was like, ooh, I really like this girl. I'm really curious to see what she's going to do. I think she has a lot of compassion and heart, but I also think that she's very strong. And I'm just so excited to see what she does in book 2, you guys. It's gonna be crazy. November cannot come soon enough. So definitely Violet is a new fave. All right, so the next question is biggest surprise, which I was supposed to answer after I did biggest disappointment, but I completely skipped it. I feel like I usually skip a question every time I do one of these tag videos, but I got it. So my biggest surprise of the year, not that I thought that I wouldn't love any book by this author, but just because it was such a different genre for this author from what I have read, I'm gonna say Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. So the only other book that I've read by this author is Babel, but that book was incredible. That is a work of art. I read it towards the end of the year last year. It was a 5-star, and it's a book that I just think is so unique and blew me away, just absolutely made me fall in love with R.F. Kuang's writing. So then when I heard that she was writing this, which is kind of a more like contemporary satirical book, it's just so different from what I've read from her. She's written historical fantasy, not only with Babel, but then also the Poppy War is also a bit of a historical fantasy, which I haven't read yet, but I do want to read that series. But just because it was such a departure from what I know that she's written, I was like, I'm curious to see what I'm gonna think of this. But this book blew me away. This book was addicting. This book was absolutely infuriating and thought-provoking and just absolutely wonderful. This is another book that no matter your genre preference, I highly encourage everyone pick this up. It really takes a look at the publishing industry, the racism within the industry, and also takes a look at just an absolutely unhinged, super unlikable character, and you follow their journey. I really, really enjoyed my experience with this book. It's once again one of the most unique books that I have ever read, and R.F. Kuang has now delivered that for me twice, so I think that she's just a very, very special author. And Yellowface, it was a very, very pleasant and fantastic surprise. All right, the next question is a book that made you cry. Do I have news for you? I cry at everything. Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm a Pisces moon. I literally cry at everything. When I am happy, when I am sad, when I am overwhelmed, when I am angry, all of the above. So I have like a pretty big stack of books that made me cry. I'll just go through kind of rapid fire why they made me cry. Number 1, Project Hail Mary, Rocky's entire existence, and also this book is incredible. And as I said in the beginning, I finished this and the realization washed over me that I had just read one of the best books that I've ever read in my life, and that made me emotional. So absolutely cried with this one. Fourth Wing, if you know, you know, happens towards the end of the book. Didn't expect that at all and was very sad about that. The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. Cried for multiple reasons. There's a lot of sad moments in this book, but also just because I love these characters so much, and anything that happens to them, any discussions that they had that were a little deep or emotional, I was crying with them. Also, I'm just like sad to be leaving their POV because the future books in the Crowns and Iaxia series will be in other characters' POVs, which I'm excited for, but Araya and Rain are really special to me. So just cried throughout in general. Do I even need to say anything? I feel like if you haven't even read this, you've probably like heard just kind of the vibe around this book. Ugly crying. Terrible, horrible, sliding down the wall. All hope is lost. Despair is here. I couldn't handle it. So this book definitely takes the cake. Probably made me cry the most. Okay, the next question is favorite book to movie adaptation so far this year. I don't feel like I've watched many new book to movie adaptations. I did watch the first couple episodes of Daisy Jones and the Six, but I never finished that. I was liking it, but I wasn't obsessed, so I just didn't continue on with it, which I know is a sin. It's a bookish sin because I love Daisy Jones and the Six, so I guess I'll go with that. Okay, next one is favorite review that you've written this year. So I don't write reviews. I will just talk about, I guess, books that I've vlogged and kind of talked about my experience with. One of my favorite is a Project Hail Mary. I really liked the vlog where I read that book because I just cried a lot, and it's fun to revisit it and just see my emotions at reading that book and just being so surprised that a sci-fi really worked for me. I will also say The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. I did a reading vlog specifically for that book, and it was really fun because I just basked in all the greatness that was that book. So that was really fun as well. All right, this question is very fun. Most beautiful book you bought this year. Guys, I have so many. Let's go. So first up is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I bought this from Dragonsteel, which I believe is his publishing company, I think. But this book is obviously just so gorgeous. Are you kidding me? There is also art in this book, and I think all fantasy books should have art in them. Look at her. And oh my gosh, look at that. Just so, so gorgeous. Really excited to pick this book up. I heard that you have to read it after you finish the Mistborn trilogy though, so I just have one more book to go, and then I will hopefully be picking this up this year. Another stunner is A Touch of Magic Designs and Dominique Wesson made Throne of Glass dust jackets. This is just the dust jacket for Heir of Fire. This is my favorite one. I just think it is perfection. I look at this book all the time. I think it's so, so beautiful. Also, Blood Solace by Bella Roth. This is the second book in the Blood Gray series. This is an epic fantasy romance. Really, really loved the first book as well, Blood Mercy. So this is the second book, and I just think this is so gorgeous. It reminds me of Lover. I think that this book is really, really beautiful. Another special edition that I got this year is the Litjoy Crate editions of the Folk of the Air series. This is The Cruel Prince. Really beautiful. Just reminds me of a book that would be in a fantasy novel, in a fairy tale. Really stunning, amazing end pages. This also has Holly Black's annotations in it, so I'm very, very excited to reread the series and read those annotations. And then, of course, I can't not talk about the Fairy Loot editions of the Crescent City series, House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath. I'm just gonna show House of Earth and Blood right now, but this is the little sleeve that it comes in. Super gorgeous. And then the actual book is ridiculous. Like, this is just so beautiful. Physical book is beautiful as well. End pages make me want to scream. This is definitely my favorite edition of these books that I have. Really gorgeous, absolutely love, obsessed. Bury me with this book, please. All right, and the very last question of the mid-year book Freakout tag is, what books do you really need to read by the end of the year? Besties, let me tell you, all of them, every book. Every book that exists, every book that I own, I would love to read by the end of the year. Of course, that's not going to happen. Let me talk about a few that are standing out and kind of just my reading plans for the rest of the year. All right, so first up is The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy, I believe it's called. Also another stunning, amazing book. I really, really want to start this trilogy this year. I would love to say that I'm going to finish it, but who can say, right? Who could possibly know or predict that? But I would definitely like to get to this. This is a very classic, very well-loved fantasy series that I'm very much looking forward to. Next is The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I'm very excited for this book. I'm actually gonna be reading it in July, so I will be able to make good on what I'm saying right now, which is I really need to read this book. I've been hearing really great things. This is a fantasy novel that takes place at sea. I don't think I've read a book that takes place on a ship at sea, at least for the majority of the book, so I'm really looking forward to this. I really, 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 really want to read this next book by the end of the year. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but I'm gonna put it out there in the universe because I really want to read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss by the end of the year. I have this really stunning edition, which was gifted to me by Kara, and I really want to read this, you guys. Not just because it's really beautiful, but it is an adult fantasy about the most notorious wizard of all time in this world. I think that that sounds fantastic. It is just a book that is always on my mind, always one that I'm like, oh, I should pick that up, but I think just because it is so long and I'm a little bit intimidated by it, I don't know, I haven't picked it up yet. Oh my god, this has art in it too. Guys, I did not know this. Okay, that's made it definitely climb up my TBR a bit. I want to read this by the end of the year. This feels like maybe a fall book though, maybe like an October moment. But yeah, I definitely want to get to this one this year. Another one that I must read, I have to, non-negotiable is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I said I was gonna read this last year and I straight up didn't. So I'm really going to make it a priority to get to this book. I wanna read it in the fall. I have read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern and it's one of my favorite books of all time. I think it's beautiful. I think it's stunning. I think that it is such a whimsical, fantastic, beautifully written book. And I feel that The Starless Sea is going to be the same. I have this really stunning edition as well. This is also a beautiful book. I didn't buy it this year, but I just, oh my God, it's so gorgeous. I've heard really great things about this book and I'm just looking forward to reading more fantasies. Really my kind of priority and what I want to do and what my heart is telling me to do is just to fully lean into reading mainly fantasy and fantasy romance. I know that I kind of already do that, but I am feeling myself less and less drawn to contemporary romance as a genre. There are a few exceptions to that. Elsie Silver, I'm always picking up my horoscope romance. Magnolia Parks, the next time one of those books comes out, I'll definitely pick up. But I don't know, just overall, I'm finding myself less drawn to the genre as a whole and just really wanting to only read fantasy and fantasy romance. I've kind of been fighting that and I don't really know why. I think that I should just fully lean in and allow myself to read 99% of the time fantasy and fantasy romance. So I think I'm gonna do that. I hope that's cool with everyone. Let me know. I think what's great about the more and more that you read, I think you figure out your tastes more and more. And I just really, I mean, I've always known that fantasy is my #1 girly, but more and more I'm just finding that it's really what my heart desires. It is where I get the most fulfillment when I read, is from fantasy and fantasy romance. And I think that I should just fully lean into that. And so hopefully that is what the rest of the year will bring. All right, my beautiful friends, that is it for my mid-year book Freakout tag. I'm gonna have the questions in the description box below and I would love for you to answer them. I wanna see what's your best book of the year so far, what has disappointed you, surprised this new favorite author. Most importantly though, I wanna know what is on your TBR for the rest of the year because I don't know why, but that just makes me anxious that the year's over in 6 months and I've got a lot of books that I'd really like to read by the end of the year and I'm sure that you do as well. So go ahead, leave your comments down below, but also if you wanted to leave an emoji, go ahead and leave the swords crossing and the dragon because I feel like those represent fantasy very well, which is just calling my heart, and I think that's where I'm gonna be putting most of my focus for reading for the rest of the year. Please make sure that you are following me on Instagram and Goodreads. They are always linked down below. I really appreciate that you watched this video. I hope that you are all having a fantastic day. I love you all so much, and I will catch you guys in the next one.